The first blow didn't come with fists but with words, sharp and deliberate. "You don't need to go down there anymore," my son Daniel said, his tone clipped and impatient, as if he were speaking to a stubborn child instead of his own 78-year-old mother. His wife Marissa stood beside him, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her manicured nails tapping against her silk blouse in a rhythm that grated against my nerves. "It's our space now," she added, her eyes glinting with something cold and proprietary. That basement, my husband's workshop, my refuge when the walls of life pressed in too tightly, was suddenly off limits to me. The betrayal was so brazen it left me momentarily speechless. They didn't even try to soften it, didn't even bother with excuses about safety or clutter. Just a decree, final and absolute. Greed was written all over their faces, though they cloaked it in false smiles and half-hearted reassurances. They had moved back into my house 2 years ago when Daniel claimed they were getting back on their feet, after losing their apartment. What they never said outright, but what I learned quickly, was that my son and his wife didn't just need a roof over their heads, they needed access to everything I owned. The basement, with its locked cabinets and dusty shelves, held more than just tools. It held the carefully packed boxes of documents, heirlooms, and things I hadn't touched since my husband passed. Things that carried value, some sentimental, some financial. And I knew deep down that Daniel and Marissa's sudden interest in restricting me from entering wasn't about reorganizing storage. It was about control. About money. About secrets they wanted hidden until they could claim them as their own. As I stood in my own kitchen, my teacup cooling untouched on the counter, a reel of sacrifices played through my mind. I remembered the nights when Daniel was a boy, how I worked 2 jobs, typing invoices at a law office by day and scrubbing offices by night, just to keep him in decent clothes and food on the table. I remembered the college tuition I paid for, scraping together every dime from my late husband's pension and my own savings so that Daniel wouldn't start life in debt. I remembered selling my own mother's wedding ring to cover the down payment on his first car, because he had convinced me it was the only way he could hold a steady job. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every sleepless night spent worrying had been for him. And now here he was, barring me from the very space where his father's spirit lingered most. My heart ached with a familiar heaviness, the kind that comes only when love is answered with contempt. I opened my mouth to protest, to demand an explanation, but Marissa cut me off with a raised hand. "We're adults now, Eleanor," she said, her voice laced with condescension. "You don't need to keep track of everything in this house. It's too much for you. Let us handle it." The way she emphasized the word us made me feel like an intruder, like this wasn't my house anymore. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream that I had built this life, that every brick of this house had been bought with sweat and sacrifice. But Daniel just looked away, avoiding my eyes, and for the first time in 78 years I realized my son wasn't just ungrateful, he was complicit. That night, alone in my room, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, memories pressing down on me like the weight of the years themselves. I remembered my late husband Thomas, working late into the night in that basement, sanding wood, tightening bolts, building the furniture that still filled our home. That space had always been more than just storage, it was a museum of our lives, a vault of our struggles and triumphs. To be shut out of it felt like being shut out of my own history. I tossed and turned, my mind circling back to Daniel's cold tone, to Marissa's smug expression. Something was wrong. Something they were hiding. And though they thought their decree would be enough to silence me, they underestimated the one thing age had not taken from me, my resolve. The next morning, the first crack in their wall of secrecy appeared. The faucet in the upstairs bathroom had been dripping for weeks, and I finally convinced Daniel to call a plumber. He was reluctant, said he'd handle it himself, but after the leak grew worse and Marissa complained about the water bill, he reluctantly agreed. When the plumber arrived, a stocky man in his late 40s with grease-stained overalls and kind eyes, I watched Daniel's unease grow. Instead of leading him directly to the upstairs bathroom, Daniel hovered, making excuses, directing him toward the kitchen sink first, then mumbling about a misplaced wrench. The plumber frowned. "I'll need to check the main line in the basement," he said matter-of-factly, and that's when Daniel's composure cracked. His eyes darted to Marissa, who stiffened visibly. "The basement's off-limits," she said sharply. "Just fix it from upstairs." The plumber's eyebrows lifted. "Ma'am, with respect, if the issue is tied to the main line, I need access to where it connects. That's usually the basement. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the repair." Their refusal was so blatant, so immediate, that my suspicions ignited into certainty. They were hiding something down there, something they didn't want anyone, not even a tradesman who couldn't care less about our family drama, to see. My pulse quickened as I realized this wasn't paranoia, it was confirmation. I tried to step in, my voice trembling but firm. Daniel, let him do his job. This is my house, and I want the plumbing fixed properly. For the first time in days, Daniel met my gaze, and what I saw there chilled me. It wasn't the boy I had raised, the boy who once cried when he scraped his knee or hugged me tightly before leaving for school. No, this was a man with secrets, a man willing to lie to my face without hesitation. Mom, it's fine, he said, his tone forced. We'll take care of it ourselves. But the plumber, sensing the tension, didn't back down. With respect, he repeated, if I can't check the basement, I can't fix the problem. It's your call, ma'am. Marissa tried to cut me off again, but I held up my hand this time, silencing her the way she had silenced me. Open the basement, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Daniel clenched his jaw, his nostrils flaring. For a moment, I thought he might physically block the door. But then, with a grunt of frustration, he grabbed the keys and unlocked it. The hinges groaned as the door swung open, revealing the familiar scent of dust and wood polish. I hadn't been down there in months, and stepping toward the threshold felt like stepping into a memory. The plumber brushed past Daniel and descended the creaking steps, his flashlight beam cutting through the dimness. I stood at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding, while Daniel and Marissa hovered behind me like nervous sentinels. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last, until the plumber's voice floated up from below. Ma'am, he called, his tone tinged with something I couldn't quite place, unease, maybe even disbelief. You'd better come down here. Every muscle in my body tensed. My fingers tightened on the banister, and for a moment I felt my knees might give way. Behind me, Marissa muttered something under her breath in a tone that sounded almost panicked. Daniel shifted, blocking half the doorway as if he could still keep me from seeing. But it was too late. Whatever they had been hiding was about to come to light, and I knew in that instant that my life, the life I thought I understood, the family I thought I knew, was about to shatter in ways I couldn't yet imagine. My breath caught in my throat as I took the first step down, my hand trembling against the railing. Like, subscribe and stay with me, I whispered under my breath, my voice barely audible even to myself, because you won't believe what I'm about to uncover. The basement air was damp, carrying that earthy chill I always associated with the place. I gripped the railing tighter as I descended, each creak of the stairs echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. The plumber's flashlight darted across the room, illuminating cobwebbed corners and the workbench where Thomas once crafted birdhouses for the grandchildren Daniel never had time to visit. I expected to see pipes, storage boxes, maybe some dust. Instead, what caught my eye first was the tarp. A large, heavy canvas tarp stretched across the floor, its corners weighted down by bricks, as if concealing something underneath. My stomach tightened. The plumber's beam rested on it, then flicked toward me. His brows furrowed. Ma'am, did you know about this? Daniel was instantly at my side, his voice sharp. It's nothing, just some storage we're reorganizing. His words cracked with forced calm. Marissa clutched the railing above, her knuckles white. It's private, she snapped. Not your business. But the plumber didn't move. He bent slightly, hand brushing the tarp's edge. Daniel lurched forward. Leave it, he barked, his voice louder than I had ever heard it, startling us all. The plumber froze, then slowly raised his hands. All right, he said, backing up a step. But my heart was hammering now. Something was under that tarp, and it wasn't just old junk. I forced myself forward. My legs felt like lead, but I reached the tarp's edge and crouched, ignoring Daniel's hissed warning. The musty scent of mildew mingled with something sharper, metallic, bitter. With trembling fingers, I pulled the edge back just enough to reveal stacks of cardboard boxes, their sides stamped with logos I recognized immediately. Pawn shops. Jewelry wholesalers. Places I knew Daniel frequented but never explained. Nestled among them were things that didn't belong, an antique clock I'd last seen on my mantel, the carved jewelry box my mother had left me, even the old silver tea set I had kept wrapped in cloth upstairs. My breath caught. This is mine, I whispered, my voice shaking. All of this was upstairs. My eyes darted to Daniel, who stood stiff, his jaw clenched so tightly a vein pulsed in his temple. It's safer down here, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. We were protecting it. Marissa added quickly, you forget things, Eleanor. We're just helping. The lie burned hotter than the truth might have. They thought I was senile, confused, too old to notice my own belongings disappearing. Heat flared in my chest, anger laced with humiliation. The plumber shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing family drama far beyond a leaking pipe. Look, he said carefully, I'll just check the line and be out of your way. He squeezed past, tools clanking, while I stood frozen, staring at the boxes. My son. My own flesh and blood, pilfering from me under the guise of protection. When I finally tore my gaze away, Daniel's eyes met mine, and for a split second, the mask slipped. There was no shame, no remorse. Only calculation. It was like looking at a stranger. Go upstairs, Mom, he said softly, too softly. Let us handle this. The plumber's flashlight glinted off his face, catching the hard set of his jaw. I knew in that instant that this wasn't some misunderstanding. Daniel and Marissa were hiding something far larger than stolen heirlooms. The rest of that day passed in a blur. The plumber fixed the leak quickly, avoiding eye contact as he packed up. At the door he paused, glanced at me, and murmured, Ma'am, if you need anything at all. His words trailed off, but the weight behind them lingered. He had seen the fear in my eyes, recognized the imbalance in that house. When he left, the silence was suffocating. Daniel retreated to his room, slamming the door, while Marissa busied herself in the kitchen, clattering pots as if punishing them. I sat at the dining table, my hands trembling as I stared at the tea set that was no longer there, the mantel where the clock once ticked. My life had been dismantled piece by piece, right under my nose. That night, when the house settled into uneasy quiet, I lay awake, thoughts racing. Memories bled into each other. Thomas's laugh as he polished that tea set, my mother's trembling hands passing me the jewelry box, Daniel as a boy clutching my skirt and whispering promises to take care of me when I was old. Promises. Empty, it seemed. I thought of the tarp, of the metallic smell I couldn't place, of Marissa's panicked tone. There was more down there than heirlooms. I could feel it in my bones. My throat tightened as the truth pressed in. My children weren't just greedy. They were hiding something dark. Something dangerous. The following morning, I decided to test them. At breakfast, I said casually, I need the jewelry box. My mother's. I want to polish it. Daniel froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Marissa was quicker. It's old, Eleanor, she said, too sweetly. Best to leave it in storage. It could get damaged. Their eyes flicked to each other, a silent exchange I wasn't meant to catch. The betrayal was suffocating, a noose tightening each day. I felt like a guest in my own house, tiptoeing around my own possessions, silenced at my own table. But humiliation has a way of curdling into resolve. That morning, as Marissa prattled on about bills and Daniel kept his gaze fixed firmly on his coffee, I made a silent vow. Enough. No more silence. No more being dismissed like a confused old woman. They had taken my trust, my sacrifices, and twisted them into chains. But I still had strength. I still had fight. And I would use it. By afternoon, I reached out to Arthur Sterling, an old family friend and lawyer who had handled Thomas's estate years ago. My hands shook as I dialed his number, half afraid Daniel would overhear. Arthur's warm baritone answered, steady and kind. Eleanor? My word, it's been ages. How are you? My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. Not well, Arthur, I whispered. I think my children are stealing from me. And worse, they're hiding something in my basement. There was silence on the line, then a careful, tell me everything. I did haltingly, words tumbling out like stones from a broken dam. When I finished, Arthur sighed heavily. Eleanor, you're not alone. We'll protect you. But you need to be careful. If they sense you're onto them, they may push harder. Later that week, I confided in my neighbor Clara, a widowed woman in her 60s who had often shared coffee with me on the porch before Daniel moved back. When I told her about the boxes, her face paled. I've seen men coming and going at night, she admitted, her voice low. Not just Daniel. Strangers. Carrying things into the basement. I didn't want to meddle, but her words chilled me to the core. So it wasn't just heirlooms. Something larger was at play, and my house was their staging ground. My sacrifices had built a sanctuary, and now it was being twisted into a den of secrets. Days blurred into weeks. The humiliation deepened. I overheard Marissa on the phone, laughing, saying, "She doesn't even know what's missing." Daniel began locking the basement door, keeping the key on a chain around his neck. Once, when I asked for something as simple as an old photo album, he snapped, "Stop living in the past, Mom. Let it go." His words cut deeper than any knife. Let it go. As if decades of love, memories, and sacrifice were clutter to be discarded. I wept in silence that night, the kind of sobs that left me gasping, clutching Thomas's pillow for comfort. But in the morning, my tears hardened into steel. Enough was enough. They thought me weak. They thought me blind. But they were wrong. One evening, I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror. The lines on my face, the gray in my hair, all markers of years survived, battles fought and won. I remembered raising Daniel alone after Thomas died, remembered working double shifts, remembered the loneliness and the resilience it bred. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't confused. I was a woman forged in fire, and I still had fight left in me. I picked up the phone, called Arthur again, and said the words that sealed my resolve: "I want to prepare. Whatever they're planning, I want to be ready." Arthur's response was steady, reassuring. "Then we'll start tomorrow. Bring me whatever documents you can. We'll put safeguards in place." His confidence was a lifeline, steadying me as I drifted in waters of betrayal. That night, as Daniel and Marissa laughed in the living room, oblivious to the storm building within me, I sat alone at the kitchen table, writing down everything I remembered, every missing item, every odd exchange, every cruel word. It was the first step of many. I was done being their victim. I was ready to fight back. The next morning, I slipped quietly into the basement while they were out shopping. The lock was new, but old wood has its weaknesses. With a hairpin and patience, I pried it open, my heart racing as I descended the stairs. The top was still there, heavier now, with more boxes stacked on top. And this time, something else caught my eye, a glint of metal protruding from beneath the canvas, half hidden, half revealed. I crouched, pulled the edge back further, and my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just heirlooms. It was weapons. Guns, wrapped in cloth, carefully stacked. My hands trembled as the truth slammed into me like a freight train. My children weren't just thieves. They were criminals. And they were using my home as their vault. A noise upstairs snapped me back, footsteps, the creak of the front door. They were home. My chest tightened, breath shallow. I quickly replaced the tarp, my fingers fumbling, and raced up the stairs, my knees protesting each step. As I reached the top, Daniel's shadow fell across the hallway. "Mom." His voice was casual, but my blood ran cold. Had he seen me? Did he know? I forced a smile, clutching the banister. "Just cleaning," I lied. But his eyes lingered on me, sharp, calculating. And in that silence, I knew the war had begun. "Like, subscribe and stay close," I whispered to myself as I retreated to my room, "because this is only the beginning, and they have no idea what I'm about to do." I hardly slept that night. My mind kept circling back to the gleam of cold metal beneath that tarp, the weight of the boxes that weren't just filled with my heirlooms but with things I had no business keeping in my home. Guns. I tried to convince myself maybe they were registered, maybe Daniel had some reason I hadn't heard yet, but the lies crumbled as quickly as they formed. My son didn't even like hunting. Thomas had once offered to take him deer hunting in the fall when he was 15, and Daniel had scoffed, preferring to stay inside with his video games. No, these weren't hunting rifles passed down from uncles. They were stockpiled with intention, with secrecy. And Marissa's panicked face told me enough. This wasn't just about hiding my things. It was about something darker. When dawn broke, I dressed slowly, buttoning the same cardigan Thomas had always said made me look dignified. In the mirror, my eyes looked older than yesterday, but sharper too. I whispered to my reflection, "No more hiding." My plan wasn't fully formed yet, but I knew the first step was documentation. I couldn't just tell people what I saw. Daniel would twist it, Marissa would smear me as confused, and suddenly I'd be the crazy old woman locked out of her own basement. No, I needed proof. So I bought myself a notebook, plain and brown, and began writing everything down. Dates, times, what I saw, what I heard. I wrote about the missing jewelry box, the tea set, the clock. I wrote about Marissa's phone call where she laughed and said I wouldn't notice. I even wrote about the plumber's words, careful to note the unease in his voice. Each page felt like reclaiming a sliver of power, though it was a fragile sort, hidden under my mattress where no one but I could find it. That same afternoon, Clara came by with fresh bread from the bakery. Her visits had become more frequent since I confided in her, and her presence was a balm to my frayed nerves. Over coffee, I leaned close and whispered, "I need your help." She didn't hesitate, just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Anything." I told her about the guns, about the fear clawing at my chest, and she paled. "Eleanor, you need to call the police." The word felt like fire. I shook my head. "Not yet. If I call too soon, they'll twist it. Daniel will say I'm losing my mind. They'll bury me before anyone believes me. I need proof." Clara nodded slowly, though her brow furrowed with worry. "Then we'll get it," she said, as though the decision was already made. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel entirely alone. Arthur, too, became my anchor. I visited his office discreetly, carrying the notebook tucked beneath my coat. He read silently, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. When he finally looked up, his expression was grave. "Eleanor, this isn't just elder abuse. This could be criminal activity, serious criminal activity. If those firearms aren't licensed," he trailed off, shaking his head. "You need to be careful. Do not confront them. Not until we know exactly what we're dealing with." He leaned forward. "I can help you set up protections, power of attorney, asset locks, emergency contacts. But you'll need to trust me completely." My throat tightened as I nodded. Trust. It had become such a fragile word. But with Arthur, I felt safe. Meanwhile, inside the house, the walls tightened around me. Daniel had begun locking not only the basement but also the garage. Marissa kept a ledger on the counter, writing down bills and muttering about managing household expenses, as if I weren't sitting right there. Once, I went to the fridge for milk, only to find my name scribbled on sticky notes plastered across the shelves. "Don't touch. Reserved." My own food, in my own house, rationed as if I were some unwelcome guest. Humiliation settled into my bones like winter frost, but I forced myself to play along, feigning forgetfulness, nodding politely. Inside though, every note, every slammed door, every dismissive glance added fuel to a fire I hadn't felt in years. At night, the house came alive in ways it never had before. I heard footsteps on the basement stairs at 2 a.m, muffled voices arguing, the scrape of heavy objects being dragged. Once, I crept into the hallway and peeked down, only to see a sliver of light spilling from the crack under the basement door. Daniel's voice was low, urgent. "We can't keep it here forever," he hissed. Marissa whispered back, "She doesn't know. Just a little longer." I tiptoed back to bed, my heart racing, my notebook burning with the need for another entry. The doubts came in waves, crashing against the resolve I was building. Was I too old to handle this? Would anyone believe me over the polished lies of a son and his perfect wife? Sometimes, lying in the dark, I wondered if it would be easier to let them take it all, to let the house and the heirlooms and the memories slip away just to keep the peace. But then I would remember Thomas's face, the way his hands worked the wood, the way he whispered promises that this house would always be my safe place. And I knew surrender wasn't an option. I had fought too hard for this life to watch it rot beneath a tarp. Clara gave me the idea. One afternoon, she said casually, "You ever think about cameras? Discreet ones? They make little ones these days, tiny enough to hide in a clock." The thought lodged in my mind and refused to leave. That evening, after Daniel and Marissa went out, I scoured the internet on my old laptop. She was right. Affordable, small, easy to install. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had once resisted every new gadget, preferring my routines. But now, technology might be my salvation. I ordered 2. When they arrived, I hid one in the hallway facing the basement door and another in the kitchen, angled discreetly from the corner shelf. My hands trembled as I set them up, but when the lights blinked green, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: hope. The footage trickled in, grainy at first, then clearer. I watched at night, earbuds tucked in, eyes glued to the screen. I saw Daniel unlocking the basement at odd hours, carrying in duffel bags I didn't recognize. I saw Marissa ushering men in through the back door, men with tattoos and hard eyes, men who didn't look like friends. I saw my own house being transformed into something sinister. The pit in my stomach grew, but so did my resolve. Each clip went into a hidden folder on a flash drive Arthur had given me. "Keep it safe," he'd said. "It may save you." Then one night, the footage gave me more than proof. It gave me horror. Daniel was in the kitchen, his face tense, pacing. Marissa sat at the table, her phone pressed to her ear. "The shipment's secure," she whispered. "No, she doesn't suspect. She's too old to notice." My blood ran cold. Shipment. Secure. My house wasn't just storage for stolen heirlooms or hidden weapons, it was part of something larger. Something organized. My children weren't just greedy, they were complicit in a world I barely understood but knew was dangerous. I sat frozen, the glow of the screen reflecting in my glasses, as Daniel stopped pacing and muttered, "We need to move it before anyone comes sniffing." "If she finds out," he didn't finish. Marissa's eyes flicked up, sharp, cruel. "Then we'll make sure she doesn't." The silence that followed was heavier than any words could have been. My heart hammered, my breath shallow. I paused the video, my hand trembling, and replayed it, needing to hear again what I prayed I had misunderstood. But the words didn't change. Make sure she doesn't. My own children. Planning for the day I found out. I called Arthur the next morning, my voice shaking. "They're into something illegal. I have proof now. Real proof." His voice was steady, though I could hear the urgency beneath. "Bring it to me. Don't let them see you. We'll escalate this." But when I hung up, my hand lingered on the phone. Escalate meant danger. Escalate meant they might know I was onto them. And from the way Marissa's words echoed in my head, I knew what that could mean for me. That night, Clara came by again, but I couldn't tell her. Not yet. I forced a smile, shared tea, but my mind was elsewhere. Every tick of the clock felt like borrowed time. Upstairs, Daniel and Marissa argued in hushed tones, their voices carrying down the hallway. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear. "She's watching us," Daniel muttered. "I can feel it." Marissa's reply was cold, sharp. "Then we need to handle her before she ruins everything." The words sliced through me. Handle her. I backed away from the door, my knees weak, my breath ragged. They weren't just hiding things in the basement anymore. They were preparing for me. I sat in the dark that night, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline, the weight of the truth pressing heavy on my chest. My own children had turned my home into a den of crime, had stolen my trust, my safety, and now, maybe even plotted my end. But as the tears burned down my cheeks, a different fire lit inside me. They thought I was frail. They thought I was blind. But they had forgotten something vital. I had survived worse. And I wasn't about to go quietly. The next morning, I slipped the flash drive into my cardigan pocket and whispered to myself, like, subscribe, and stay close, because what I just uncovered changes everything. And I'm not done yet. The invitation to Sunday dinner arrived not as a courtesy but as a command. Daniel announced it at breakfast, his tone clipped. "We're having people over this weekend. Friends, neighbors. I expect you to be there. Just behave yourself." His eyes flicked toward me like a warning, while Marissa stood behind him, arranging flowers on the counter with that smile that never reached her eyes. It was strange. Marissa never cared for neighbors. She called them nosy suburban types. Yet now she was inviting them, along with Arthur, who had suddenly received a personal call from Daniel himself. My stomach twisted as I realized what this was. A performance. They were staging a scene to paint themselves as the respectable couple, the dutiful son and loving fiancé. And I would be cast as the doddering old woman, confused and bitter, the one in need of help. But they had no idea I had already armed myself with something far stronger than their performance, proof. The flash drive weighed heavy in my cardigan pocket as I planned each step. I had rehearsed the moment in my mind a dozen times, the right time to speak, the right words to use, the right witnesses to hear. I would not let them twist the story again. This time, the truth would not whisper in secret. It would thunder. Sunday came, the sky low with clouds, the air charged like before a storm. My house, was filled with people Daniel and Marissa had carefully chosen, a couple of their friends from work, neighbors who rarely spoke to me, even Mr. Davis from across the street, who always eyed me with suspicion. And Arthur. He arrived in a crisp suit, giving me a subtle nod as he shook my hand, slipping a small recorder into my palm. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "Let them speak first." The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, roast chicken steaming in the center. Marissa poured wine with an elegance practiced for show, her laughter chiming too loudly at small jokes. Daniel played host, clapping shoulders, telling stories, his arm draped around Marissa like a stage prop. I sat quietly at the end of the table, my hands folded, the very picture of passivity. Inside, though, my pulse beat like a war drum. It didn't take long for the script to reveal itself. Between bites of chicken, Daniel sighed heavily, then looked around the table with the face of a man carrying a burden. "It's been difficult lately," he said. "Mom hasn't been herself. Forgetting things. Getting paranoid." Murmurs of sympathy rippled around the table. Marissa placed a hand on his arm, her voice sweet. "We're doing our best, of course. But sometimes love means stepping in, even when it's hard." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I forced myself still. Let them weave their web. Their arrogance would be their undoing. Daniel continued, his voice low and full of feigned sorrow. "Just last week, she accused us of stealing from her. Imagine that. Us, her own family. It broke my heart." Mr. Davis shook his head, muttering, "Terrible shame." Marissa dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "She even told people she heard things in the basement. Can you believe that? Hallucinations. We worry for her safety." That was the moment. I drew in a breath, slow and steady, then let it out in a voice that carried across the table. "Hallucinations, you say? Then perhaps you'd like to explain these." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, my hand steady, and held it up for everyone to see. Conversations died instantly. All eyes turned toward me. Daniel's face drained of color, Marissa's smile froze, brittle as glass. Arthur leaned forward, his voice calm but clear. "If I may, I have a laptop here. Why don't we show the guests?" He opened his briefcase and within seconds, the screen glowed in the dim room. Silence fell as the first clip began to play, Daniel, unlocking the basement at 2 a.m., lugging a heavy duffel bag down the stairs. Then another, Marissa ushering tattooed strangers through the back door. Another, their whispered conversation at the table. The words echoed through the speakers, cold and undeniable. "The shipment's secure. She doesn't suspect." Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a fork with a sharp clang. Mr. Davis leaned forward, his mouth open. Daniel shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is taken out of context," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She's manipulating you all, this is fake." Marissa stood too, her hands trembling as she pointed at me. "She's trying to ruin us. She's sick, don't you see? This is elder abuse." But Arthur's voice cut through their protests, sharp as steel. "This footage is time-stamped, authenticated. It cannot be fabricated by a 78-year-old woman on her own. And more importantly, the words are yours." He hit pause at the exact moment Marissa's voice rang out, "Then we'll make sure she doesn't." The room erupted. Clara, sitting quietly at the corner, rose to her feet. "I've seen it too," she said firmly. "She showed me weeks ago. I know what I heard." Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into judgmental stares aimed at Daniel and Marissa. Their performance was unraveling thread by thread. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his face red with fury. "You think you can do this to me in my own house?" His words came out like venom, but I rose too, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Your house." My voice was calm, but it carried. "This is my house. My husband built it for me, and you turned it into a warehouse for criminals. You told lies about me, you humiliated me, and now you dare to call me sick? No more, Daniel. No more." The silence that followed was electric. Marissa's mask cracked completely, her lips curled into a snarl as she hissed, "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Arthur snapped the laptop shut, his tone clipped. "That sounded very much like a threat, Mrs. Brooks. And it's been recorded." Half the table stood abruptly, chairs scraping, mutters of unbelievable, and I never would have thought, as neighbors gathered their coats. Mr. Davis, once skeptical of me, turned with wide eyes. I think the police should be told. His voice carried weight, and heads nodded in agreement. Daniel's face twisted with desperation. Mom, don't do this. Please. We can fix this. Just, don't take it further. His words wavered between pleading and threatening, the boy I once cradled flickering behind the hardened man he had become. My throat ached, but my voice stayed steady. You made your choice when you locked me out of my own basement. When you plotted in my own kitchen. When you decided I was disposable. I am done being silent. The tension in the room snapped like a string pulled too tight. Marissa lunged forward, her hand swiping for the flash drive still in my palm. Instinct took over, I jerked back, the drive clutched tight. Arthur stepped between us, his voice commanding. Enough. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Clara's sharp gasp broke the stillness. We all turned. At the edge of the table, one of the duffel bags Daniel had hastily dragged upstairs earlier sat slightly open. A metal barrel gleamed under the candlelight. Gasps turned into chaos. Someone shouted, "Call the police." And in that instant, the front door slammed open. Two men, strangers with hard eyes and leather jackets, stepped inside as though they owned the place. Their gaze swept the room, landing on the duffel bag, then on me. The air thickened with dread. Daniel's face went white. I tightened my grip on the flash drive, my heart pounding in my ears, as one of the men spoke in a gravelly voice. Looks like we came at the wrong time. Or maybe the right one. The moment those two men stepped into my dining room, time slowed. Their boots thudded against the hardwood like the ticking of a clock counting down, every step louder than the last. One's face was scarred along the jawline, his eyes sharp and cold, scanning every corner of the room. The other had a thick beard and a heavy leather jacket, the kind of presence that made the candles flicker as if the air itself recoiled. The neighbors froze mid-step, clutching their coats. Clara backed toward the wall, her hand flying to her mouth. Arthur instinctively positioned himself closer to me, his body forming a shield. The laptop still hummed on the table, its screen frozen on Daniel's betrayal. And there, on the floor by the duffel bag, gleamed the undeniable evidence of their secret, a weapon barrel peeking out in plain sight. Daniel's voice broke first. You weren't supposed to come here. Not now. His words trembled, but the men ignored him, their attention fixed on the bag. Scarred Jaw reached down, tugged it open, and revealed the stash, 2 rifles, a case of ammunition, and a smaller box filled with rolled bills. Gasps rippled around the table like a wave crashing against rock. Bearded Jacket looked up, his eyes meeting mine with something that chilled me more than his size. A smile. Slow. Knowing. So, he said, his voice gravelly, the lady of the house finally knows. He kicked the bag shut with the side of his boot, his attention sliding to Daniel and Marissa. You idiots. Couldn't even keep your own mother in line. My heart clenched at the word idiots. My son shrank under it like a child scolded at school. Marissa grabbed his arm, whispering sharply, "Say something, fix this." But Daniel was shaking, his once practiced charm stripped away, leaving nothing but fear. We were handling it. She doesn't understand what she saw. His attempt at control rang hollow. Scarred Jaw barked a laugh, dry and humorless. Handling it? You think letting her record you, parade it in front of the neighbors, is handling it? She has everything. His gaze flicked to the flash drive still clutched in my hand. Give it here. Arthur stepped forward, his voice ironclad. Not a chance. This is evidence. The police will. The man's hand darted to his jacket, pulling back just enough for us to glimpse the edge of metal. The room stiffened. Neighbors gasped. Someone whispered a prayer under their breath. Arthur froze mid-sentence, his jaw tight. My grip on the flash drive tightened until my knuckles went white. In that instant, a decision crystallized inside me. I had been silent too long. I had let others dictate my worth, let fear push me into corners. No more. Not in my house. Not when my life and the truth were hanging in the balance. I raised my chin and spoke, my voice cutting through the tension. If you want this, you'll have to take it from me. But know this, it's already backed up. Copies are safe. Even if you silence me, the truth will live on. The men's expressions flickered, surprise cracking their mask of intimidation. Behind me, Arthur gave the faintest nod, confirming the bluff I had spun into reality. I hadn't made copies yet, but they didn't need to know that. For the first time that night, the power shifted. The neighbors stirred, emboldened by my words. Clara spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. We saw it too. We all saw it. You can't erase that. Others murmured agreement. Suddenly, Daniel and Marissa were no longer hosts, they were cornered animals under the harsh light of truth. Scarred Jaw snarled, snapping at Daniel, "This is your mess. Fix it." Daniel's face crumpled under the weight of it. His voice cracked, no longer the confident man who dismissed me at the breakfast table. "Mom, please, just stop this. Don't let it go further." His plea might have pierced me once, but not tonight. Tonight I saw him not as my boy but as a man who had chosen lies, greed, and betrayal over love. The wail of sirens shattered the silence. Red and blue lights flashed through the curtains, splashing across the horrified faces gathered in my dining room. Someone had called, perhaps Mr. Davis, perhaps Clara, but it didn't matter. The police stormed through the door with firm voices, commanding everyone to step back. The two men raised their hands reluctantly, caught between flight and surrender. Daniel sagged into his chair, his head in his hands. Marissa shrieked, "You don't understand. This is all her fault. She planted this, she's been trying to destroy us." But the officers ignored her hysteria as they cuffed both outsiders and swept their gaze over the weapons on the floor. Arthur handed over the flash drive with calm precision. "This has everything you need," he told the officers. Time-stamped recordings, conversations, faces. One officer nodded sharply, already securing the bag. I stood silently, my body trembling from the storm of adrenaline, as Daniel was pulled to his feet. His eyes found mine, desperate, pleading. "Mom, help me. Please. I didn't mean for it to go this far." For a heartbeat, the boy I once cradled flickered there, the boy who made me cards with crooked hearts on Mother's Day. My chest ached with the weight of memory. But then I remembered the words he had spat at me days ago, "Stop questioning us. That basement is off limits." So I met his gaze with the only truth left. "You chose this, Daniel. Not me." The officers led him out into the night, Marissa screaming protests until the door slammed shut. The house, once vibrating with tension, fell silent except for the ticking of the dining room clock. Neighbors began to file out slowly, murmuring in disbelief. Clara touched my arm gently. "You were right all along. You were brave." Mr. Davis, once skeptical, avoided my eyes but gave a stiff nod before leaving. Soon only Arthur and I remained in the wreckage of the evening. He poured me a glass of water, his voice gentler now. "It's over, Eleanor. You did it." I sank into my chair, staring at the half-eaten meal, the flickering candles now reduced to smoke. "Did I?" I whispered. "My son is gone. My family, broken." Arthur placed a hand over mine. "Broken things can be mended. But only if the rot is cut out first. Tonight you chose truth over silence. That's the only way healing begins." The words echoed in my heart long after he left. That night, I wandered through the empty house, the rooms heavy with memories. I paused at the basement door, unlocked now, the padlock cut away by officers. Slowly, I descended into the cool, dim air. Shelves lined with my husband's old tools stood untouched, dusty relics of the life we once built together. In the corner, where the duffel bags had been, the floor was bare, marked only by scuffs. I closed my eyes and let the tears come, tears not just for Daniel's betrayal, but for the years I spent believing love alone could protect us. I had learned too late that greed could twist even family into strangers. But dawn came, as it always does. And with it, a new clarity. The house was mine again, not because a court declared it, but because I had claimed it. My husband's memory, no longer tainted by secrets buried below. The echoes of lies had been replaced by the steady truth. I had fought back, and I had won. Weeks later, I stood on my porch with Clara, watching the sun rise. She asked me softly, "Do you regret it? Exposing him?" I thought for a long moment before answering. I regret what he chose. I regret the path he took. But truth isn't what broke us. Lies did. She nodded, squeezing my hand. Then maybe this is the start of something new. And I realized she was right. The start of healing, the start of peace, the start of living not in fear but in freedom. So to you who are listening, remember this: betrayal may come from the ones closest to your heart, and it will cut deeper than any wound. But silence only feeds the darkness. Speak. Stand. Protect what matters, even when it means standing alone. Because family isn't blood, it's truth, it's loyalty, it's love that doesn't vanish when tested. I thought I knew my children. I was wrong. But I know myself now. And that is enough.